Alright everybody, we're back with part 3 of my Best of Next Fest February 2023 showcase, highlighting my favorite demos we checked out during that week of a lot of games. We are starting things off with Bleak Sword DS. This is an Apple Arcade game that is being ported to the PC, and it kind of plays like mini Dark Souls or mini Souls-like combat. Your mission is to travel across the land to defeat the evil prince, one field and one group of baddies at a time. Combat is all about managing your stamina, which is of course the white bar in the upper left, and the main element of the game, at least from what we played, is using your block/parry in order to set up enemies for increased damage. One thing that the store page did say is that you will eventually be able to play like randomly or procedurally generated remix versions of the main game, which does sound interesting. From what we played, it looks like it's going to be an interesting title, but I don't know just how, in-depth these mechanics and systems are going to be. But if you're looking for a kind of challenging hack and slash that you can play on the quick side, then this could be a fun one to check out. And now for something very different, this is Yog-Sothoth's Yard. And this game is, and I'm going to need to take a breath before I say this, a visual novel dating sim anime Lovecraftian SCP horror hotel management sim. Whew, boy. So, for this one, you are taking over your deceased relative's house, which is also kind of like prime SCP central in this universe. And under threat of your school loans, you have decided to brave eldritch horrors and mysteries in order to earn a living and pay off that debt. So this is one of those games that it's trying to do a whole lot of things. In fact, the footage you're seeing, this is after about 30 minutes of watching the story cutscenes play out, which is kind of bringing me back to my time playing Library of Ruina. But once a game gets off the floor here, your mission is to decide what rooms to work on, what you spend each day doing to keep your hotel guests happy, keep money coming in, and of course manage the lives of your various employees who each have very powerful and mysterious backgrounds. All in all, this is one of those games that I was starting to get into a little bit, but from what I played, it definitely has some onboarding and pacing issues. After about an hour or so into the actual demo, I still didn't quite get what the progression or what are the actual decision makings that you're going to do in this game. But if you are looking for a visual novel style game with at least a little bit more input to it, this could be one worth checking out. I'm curious to see, kind of much like with Project Moon games, where this is all going to go in terms of its mechanics. We now have Full Void. This is a puzzle platformer that is very inspired by the likes of Flashback, Out of This World, not only with its own platforming and physics, but as you saw right there, with many ways of your main character getting killed. Our story is that it is the far future, and AI is taking over, and it's up to us, as one of the few remaining humans not plugged in order to save the day, and we will do that with the power of box moving puzzles, running and jumping, and again, hopefully not dying. So as I said, this one follows in that puzzle platforming style where all jumps are committed base, movement is very deliberate, and everything and anything in this game is going to be out to kill you. And that may be a little bit frustrating for some people who aren't used to this style of puzzle platformer. As you'll play through, you'll do more in terms of hacking puzzles, and the majority of these puzzles are going to be environmentally based. How do you get from point A to point B and not get killed in the process? But I really like the aesthetic of this one. The cutscenes do a really great job of emphasizing some of the nightmarish things that are going on, but it can be a little tricky to figure out what you need to do in a given situation, as you kind of saw right there. But this is one of those games that you're either going to be all in or pulled off very quickly. But if you are a fan of the likes of Out of This World and Flashback and so on, this looks like it's going to be another really solid entry in that design. We now have Striving for Light Survival. This is the Vampire Survivor-like kind of edition of the game Striving for Light, which in of itself is an action roguelike. For this one, the game is taking its idea of procedurally generated skill trees and the basic gameplay into the VS-like territory. So, the game itself, as with other Vampire Survivor-likes, this one is wave-based. After every wave, you are taken back to the skill tree, where when you apply a point to a node, the tree itself will branch off in a different way and will do it differently each time you play. From what we played of this one, the actual passives are, while they're meaningful, they're not really changing like the properties of your weapons or what you're going to be doing run by run or wave by wave. There are additional characters to unlock, different melee and range weapons, and similar to that of a Brotado, you are going to have to figure out how the skill tree will synergize with your weapons in order to have the best possible chance at winning. All in all, while I like this one, it still didn't really do, I think, a whole lot different for the formula, and we're going to have to wait and see what will be the next really big VS-like. But in the meantime, if you're looking for another one to check out, Striving for Light Survival could scratch that itch. And now we have Teslagrad 2. This is of course a sequel to Teslagrad, which in itself could be described as a magnetic Metroidvania. We're playing as a different character in a different world, but with another mysterious tower we need to climb up. The main tech of the Teslagrad series is a use of magnetism. You'll gain two different polarities, blue and red, and of course, opposites attract, and the same repels. And you will need to do that for any combination of puzzle solving, platforming, and of course, fighting and dealing with a variety of enemies. Now, the demo itself didn't really show too much off on the actual combat front, but from what we play, this is definitely going to be leaning towards kind of advanced platforming, with the use of the magnetism affecting your own physics when it comes to how high you go, how fast you move, etc. And with that, it did feel, I think, a little janky in some spots, such as having to use boxes and magnetism to properly get to a specific height. And of course, there'll be a load of secrets, collectibles to go back to, more upgrades, and etc. And from what we played, if you are in the mood for a very atmospheric and very challenging Metroidvania, Teslagrad 2 can certainly be one to look forward to. And now we have Desynced. This is another logistics sim style game that does show some promise. Unfortunately, the onboarding and I think just the general UI could use some work. We are once again stranded on a far distant planet, and the only way to survive is going to be, you guessed it, setting up logistic chains and production. The twist of Desynced compared to some of the other logistic sim style games, one, it's played very similar to that of an RTS, and instead of you building a variety of structures and units to do jobs, this game focuses a lot on a module-based design. If you build a mining module and attach it to a unit, well, that unit is now going to be a mining droid. If you attach a turret, now it's going to be a defensive bot. And a huge point about this game, compared to your Factorios and Dyson Sphere, instead of you setting up production chains using buildings and conveyor belts and so on, you're using the command queues or the production queues on the left to set up different rules, such as repeat what's being constructed in slot 2. When slot 2 is filled, go to slot 4, and moving and doing things along those lines. So in one respect, it is far more compact compared to other logistics sims, but the UI and the tutorial I don't feel did a good enough job of explaining how does any of this work. Because it's all kind of slot driven, if an item ends up in the wrong slot, it completely ruins your entire production chain. But with that said, if you are looking for a slightly different and a little bit more complicated take on logistics sims, Desynced could be one to check out, and I do hope they decide to go over their tutorial and onboarding and try to make it a little bit easier to understand. Now up we have Afterimage, a hand-drawn Metroidvania. When the world is in trouble, it's going to be up to us to platform, upgrade, and get around in order to save it. Also attack a lot of strange wildlife. So this is a game that definitely follows the Metroidvania motif. It leans more into kind of the, I guess, Igavania style, with equipment, leveling up, and getting more stats. While the world itself certainly looks gorgeous, one of the issues I did have with this game, unfortunately, is that the beginning of it does not make it easy to get into. The problem is that you're going to run into a lot of annoying enemies, and you do not have the means to properly dodge them. In fact, the quote-unquote dodge power gets unlocked far later than it should for a game like this. And from our time with the demo, I'm not quite sure, I guess, how far they're going to lean into the RPG aspect of things with equipment and gear, because we did not see any during our time playing, as well as what kind of Metroidvania staples that the game will focus on. But if you're looking for another very action-oriented take on Metroidvania, this could certainly be one to check out when it is released. And with that said, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll take a look at the rest of the games for this episode of our Next Fest Showcase. If you're interested in my thoughts on design, then check out my game design books. For entry-level students, we have 20 essential games to study, and then the Game Design Deep Dive series that takes an extensive look at different genres, with more coming soon. We now have Mika and the Witch's Mountain, a game that is heavily inspired by the likes of Studio Ghibli, and looks absolutely gorgeous with these hand-drawn animated scenes. But our story here is that we play as Mika, a witch in training, who has been tasked by her teacher to climb up a mountain using her magic powers and of course magic broom, and we learn that by getting kicked off the top of the mountain. In order to make it back up, we are going to have to find enough money to repair our broom, and to do that, we are going to go into a delivery service. And yes, that's right, we are going to be a magic delivery service as our main gameplay loop. Your job is to go around the various parts of the island, finding jobs and the items needed to deliver them, and get them to their respective clients without, of course, damaging said goods. Using the money, you'll be able to unlock better brooms, and I'm sure other upgrades along the way. And this is one of those games that it is definitely leaning into the charming aesthetic. If you're hoping for a super deadly challenging game like Death Stranding, this is probably not going to be the game for you. But it looks like it's going to be a very charming title, and just the flying and moving around felt very enjoyable to do. And I'm certainly curious to see, I guess, how do they sustain this gameplay loop from beginning to end. So if you are looking for a high-flying deliverer of a game, definitely check out Mika and the Witch's Mountain. And now we turn to Gamma 19. This is described as an action RPG brawler. We play the last human in a very post-apocalyptic world. When our arm gets stolen by an evil creature, it's going to be up to punch, kick, and do anything else along our way to get it back. Now, the reason why I'm not quite sure about the action RPG side of it is that we really didn't see that during our time with the demo. There is no experience, no real upgrades or decision making, just walk right to left, beat up things that get in your way. And that is definitely troublesome. Now, with that said though, the actual beat 'em up design is on the alright side. You do unlock the ability to kind of dash or get around attacks. You have your little green bean guy who acts as backup and support. So there's definitely some potential here for fans looking for a beat 'em up with some RPG elements to it. But unfortunately, I can't comment on that side without being able to see it or experience it. Maybe if it gets added into an updated demo or if we see more elements out of a trailer in the future. We now have Shumi Come Home. This is a 3D kind of open world platformer game. We play as Shumi, an adorable little mushroom who has gotten lost in the forest. And in order to find their way back home, we are going to have to platform, glide, and go on a merry little adventure in order to find our way back. So the game itself is definitely aimed, I think, more to the casual or moderate side of 3D platforming. Shumi can unveil like their little leaf glider whenever they're in the air, and at least at the start, they have this kind of pick that they can use to prop up one jump. And the game does hint at there being additional unlocks or things you can find to improve your platforming as the game goes on. But the structure itself leans more again to like kind of like an open or quasi-open 3D platforming. Each area will be full of required and side quests to do. Complete the required quests to open up the next area, move on, get some upgrades, and so on and so forth. And while this game is certainly not going to tax your platforming skills, it is certainly very charming to play. It handles really nicely, and the areas are big enough that there's a lot of things to explore, MacGuffins to find, and so on. So if you are looking for more of a relaxing 3D platformer, and not one that's going to make you throw your controller down in rage, then definitely check out Shumi Come Home. And now we have Dragon Bell Z, and I'm sure that name is not inspired by any popular property, right? But in Dragon Bell Z, we play as Z here. They have lost their memory while trying to complete a very important task, and we're around to get that back and, of course, save life as we know it from evil. Our main kind of platforming take or twist here is our little glowing friend that you see following Z around. They can be launched at enemies and specific objects in order to bounce up, and when you do this, it grants you iframes as well as seeds, and those seeds can be used to essentially create a healing sprout that will be your form of healing during combat and exploration. So from what we played of this one, the game certainly looks charming, and I really like the hand-drawn aesthetic of it. Now, the map could be a little bit better, and as well, English is not the first language of this one, and I'm pretty sure a lot of the translation is either like a first draft or not quite there yet. But this one does look like it could be a very entertaining Metroidvania when it is released, and I'm curious again, like with some of our other ones, about how far they're going to go with the various mechanics here. And now we have Death or Treat, an action roguelite, where you play as the spirit of Halloween, who's trying to bring back the festive cheer that is being stolen by an evil company that's got everyone hooked on video games, those damn evil things. But our kind of process here follows the kind of action roguelite MO. You'll go into various areas. The rooms themselves are handmade, but you'll get them in random orders. The resources and collectibles you pick up can be used after a run in order to upgrade your Halloween town to provide you with upgrades like more weapons, stronger attacks, spells, health, and that kind of stuff. And all in all, the game handles nicely. You have a mix of your standard attacks with specials, but with that said, it is on the kind of plain side, at least at the moment in terms of the action gameplay. You can kind of just run through a lot of the maps as is, up until you get to stuff like the bosses. And I'm not quite sure again, like, how much the rogueliteness is really going to factor in the end, and whether or not you can just quickly get through the main run fairly easily, and if there's going to be any kind of replayability like that. But if you are in the mood for another charming action roguelite, then Death or Retreat could be a fun, candy-filled time. Speaking of a fun time, we of course had to check out the Darkest Dungeon 2, with the demo now available on Steam. And from what we played of this one, the basics that we saw with the Epic Games release last year haven't changed all that much. For those of you who are completely, no pun intended, in the dark, Darkest Dungeon 2 is more of a roguelike and focus on runs compared to the grand campaign style of the first one. You'll fill your caravan of horrors with a 4-person team, and it will be up to you to guide them from beginning to end, deciding where they go, what they'll do at various stops, and hopefully not get killed in the process. So for this one, from what we played of it, I didn't quite see anything different from a mechanical standpoint compared to when we first tried it. Again, it's been over a year, I think, since we last played it. But the basics I still enjoyed. This is definitely more streamlined compared to Darkest Dungeon 1. You have far fewer trinkets and kind of special items to make use of, but said items are now more powerful and impactful during a run. Items do not cost you a turn, and healing is now percentage based rather than just on a flat set of numbers. The concepts of stress, mental damage, and getting your good and bad moments have also been reworked. And while we didn't finish the full run of the demo, we did manage to beat everyone's favorite friend from the first game. And I was getting into this one. Again, I'm curious to see where this is all going to lead in terms of the persistent elements and the roguelike elements when the game is released in a few months. But if you are hoping to play another very challenging, well, not so much dungeon crawler, I guess caravan crawler, then you should at least check out the demo for the Darkest Dungeon 2. And for our last game of this episode, we turn to Highwater. This is described as a kind of turn-based strategy adventure game where the world has been flooded and we play as survivors who are trying to get on the last rocket to Mars. And staying our way are going to be evil gangs, I'm sure capitalism will come in at some point, and we're going to make use of the environment in order to save the day. Now, the game itself definitely focuses on environmental design and environmental objects as the main way to survive. Your characters will have a few basic abilities, and they'll also come with their own kind of special moves, such as a bulky guy can knock down something heavy, as you can see right here. And you're going to have to make use of this as you're going to either be outnumbered or outgunned on each play. Now, with that said, the one issue from the demo is that it fast-forwarded through a lot of kind of story and exploration, so I don't know if there's any kind of persistent elements, upgrading characters, gear, that kind of thing, or is it going to be more like puzzle-ish kind of battles? But the game definitely has some charm to it, and again, it's another one of those titles that there could be something here for fans looking for a more, I guess, strategic-minded combat system. So with that said, we're going to wrap up part 3 of our Next Fest coverage. We've got a few more parts left. You'll find links to all the games down below, and if you'd like me to tailor your game for a future stream and video, please get in touch. Do the liking, subscribing, and bell ringing. Let me know what some of your favorite games were from Next Fest. Visit our Discord and Patreon, and come back for daily discussions on game design here, and on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games.